When I was 9 months pregnant, my husband yanked me out of my seat so his mother could sit. But that wasn't even the worst part. That evening, my body felt like it was carrying the weight of a boulder. My back ached, my feet were swollen, and every step I took felt heavy. We had gone to his parents' house for dinner, something I dreaded because it always meant his mother found new ways to make me feel small. All I wanted was to sit down, breathe, and let my body rest. The table was already crowded, so when I finally lowered myself into one of the chairs, I let out a small sigh of relief. For a moment, I thought I might actually survive the night quietly. But that peace didn't last. Colton walked over, placed a hand on my arm, and without saying a word, tugged me out of the chair. I stumbled shocked, my balance already fragile with the weight of our baby pressing on me. Before I could even ask what he was doing, his mother slid smoothly into the chair, smiling as though she had won something. The heat rose to my cheeks. I stood there, holding my belly with both hands, my face burning in front of the whole family. Nobody said a word. Not one person told him to stop. Not one person asked if I was okay. My husband didn't look at me with regret or apology. He simply adjusted the chair for his mother, as if this was the natural order of things. I forced myself to find another seat, one tucked awkwardly against the wall. It was hard to get into with my stomach in the way, but no one offered help. My legs trembled under the table, not just from exhaustion, but from the humiliation sitting heavy in my chest. Every word of conversation at that table felt like it was happening far away, muffled by the rush of anger and hurt filling my ears. I stared at my plate, barely touching the food, pretending I was fine. But inside, I was crumbling. I wanted Colton to look at me, to realize what he had just done, to reach for my hand or whisper that he was sorry. But he laughed with his parents, serving his mother food, refilling her glass, and ignoring me completely. It wasn't just a seat. It was a message. That night, I saw where I stood in his life, and it wasn't beside him. I was carrying his child. I was the one sacrificing sleep and comfort and health. Yet when it came to choosing between me and her, he didn't hesitate. The ache in my back that night was nothing compared to the ache in my heart. I sat quietly, smiling when someone looked my way, but inside a voice kept whispering, "This isn't love. This isn't respect." That single moment planted something inside me, something deeper than anger. It was the beginning of doubt, of betrayal, of realizing that the man I trusted most had chosen someone else over me. And once that seed was planted, it started to grow. When I first met Colton, I thought I had found the man who would always stand by me. He was charming, the kind of person who opened doors, pulled out chairs, and made me feel like I was the only woman in the room. In the beginning, he was protective too, calling to make sure I got home safe, bringing me soup when I was sick, holding my hand like he would never let go. I believed in him. I believed in us. But slowly, little things began to change, and all the changes seemed to lead back to one person, his mother, Loretta. At first, it was small. She would stop by our apartment unannounced, carrying bags of groceries as if I didn't know how to shop for food myself. She'd smile at me, but her words cut sharp. "Oh honey, you cook like that?" No wonder Colton looked slimmer than usual. I laughed it off, told myself it was just her way of showing care. But it didn't stop there. She would glance at my clothes and shake her head. Once, I wore a soft blue dress I loved, and she looked me up and down before saying, "Blue? On your skin tone." I would have chosen something brighter. But, of course, not everyone knows how to dress well. Colton stood right there, and instead of telling her she was out of line, he chuckled and said, "Mom just has high standards." I told myself it wasn't worth a fight. But every time she spoke, I felt like I was shrinking a little more, and every time Colton defended her instead of me, I felt a wall rising between us. When we started talking about baby names, I thought it would bring us closer. I wanted something simple, something strong. I loved the name Elias, and I could already imagine whispering it to my son. But when I shared it, Loretta wrinkled her nose. "Elias? Sounds too old-fashioned. I think James or Thomas would be better. Classic names. Respectable names." I looked at Colton, waiting for him to remind her it wasn't her choice. Instead, he nodded and said, "She has a point." It was like being erased piece by piece. My opinions, my choices, my voice. None of it mattered when Loretta had something to say. Colton would stand by her every time, as if she were the one building this life with him, not me. I started to notice the way he spoke to her versus how he spoke to me. With her, he was patient, kind, almost like a son desperate to keep his mother happy. With me, he grew short-tempered, dismissive. He would listen to her advice on everything from what he should eat for lunch to how we should decorate the nursery. My suggestions, on the other hand, were brushed off. It dawned on me that I was no longer his partner. I was a bystander in my own marriage, watching him and his mother run the show, while I stood on the sideline. The man who once made me feel cherished now made me feel invisible. And once I saw that pattern, I couldn't unsee it. Every dinner, every conversation, every decision, we We weren't husband and wife anymore. It felt like I had married into a partnership that had existed long before me, and there was no space left for my voice. Harper had always been the kind of friend who showed up when it mattered most. She was the one who reminded me to drink water when I forgot, who rubbed my shoulders when I complained about my aching back, and who made me laugh when I felt like crying. So when she told me she wanted to throw me a baby shower, I felt touched. For once, something in my pregnancy felt like it was just for me, something joyful I could hold on to. The day of the shower, Harper decorated her living room with soft balloons and little touches that made my heart swell. Tiny baby clothes hanging on a line, a cake with pastel frosting, and a table covered in gifts from friends who cared about me. I remember feeling light, almost happy, even though my body was tired. For the first time in a long time, I thought maybe I could enjoy a moment without judgment hanging over me. That peace broke the moment Loretta walked through the door. She wasn't invited, and Harper's polite smile told me she hadn't expected her either. Loretta walked in with her usual air of authority, her eyes scanning the room as though she owned it. Colton trailed behind her, not looking the least bit uncomfortable. She didn't even wait 5 minutes before the comments started. One by one, my friends handed me gifts, soft blankets, bottles, tiny onesies, and each time I opened something, Loretta had something sharp to say. When I held up a diaper bag Harper had picked out for me, Loretta laughed. This? Too fancy. She doesn't need something like that. She's already spoiled enough. The room went quiet. I felt the sting in my chest, but I tried to smile and move on, not wanting to ruin the day. Still, she didn't stop. A stuffed animal was too cheap, a stroller was too modern, and when I unwrapped a set of matching pajamas, she leaned over to Colton and said loudly, "People just waste money on her. She'll never appreciate it." I waited for him to defend me, to at least say something to ease the embarrassment, but instead he chuckled. He actually laughed along, like his mother was being witty instead of cruel. I sat there, forcing my lips into a smile, while inside I felt my stomach twist. Harper must have seen the way my hands shook when I folded the wrapping paper. She gently touched my arm and whispered, "Come with me for a second." She led me into the kitchen, away from the chatter and Loretta's running commentary. Her voice was low but firm. "Maddie, this isn't okay. You don't deserve this. Not from her, and definitely not from her. You deserve better." Her words cut deep, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. I wanted to cry, but I swallowed it down, ashamed that everyone could see the way I was being treated. I couldn't bring myself to defend myself in front of her, not when my own husband wouldn't even stand beside me. So I nodded, whispered that I was fine, and forced myself to go back into that room. I smiled, opened the rest of the gifts, and pretended not to hear the whispers that made me feel smaller with every passing minute. Inside, though, the shame burned. I stayed silent, but a part of me knew that silence was costing me more than I wanted to admit. The night my labor began, I felt a rush of fear and excitement. Every contraction reminded me that soon I would finally meet the baby I had carried for so long. I clutched Colton's hand when the pain grew stronger, hoping he would stay with me, hold me through it, remind me I wasn't alone. I believed that no matter what had happened before, this moment would be different. Surely, he would be there when our child entered the world. At the hospital, everything happened quickly. Nurses rushed around, guiding me into a room, checking monitors, preparing me for what was ahead. I looked for Colton, expecting him to follow close behind, but when I glanced toward the doorway, Loretta was already there, her hand on his arm like she owned him. She leaned in close to him, her voice firm but sweet enough to sound innocent. "You'll always be my baby first. Stay with me. You don't need to be in there. I'll wait with you." I heard her words clearly, even through the haze of pain. My chest tightened, my breath caught, and I waited for him to tell her no. I waited for him to say, "My wife needs me." But he didn't. He nodded, gave me a quick look that didn't reach his eyes, and stepped back. And just like that, he was gone. The contractions came faster, pulling me under waves of pain that left me gasping. Nurses coached me through it, one holding my hand, another telling me to breathe. They were kind, but they weren't him. With every push, I felt the emptiness where his hand should have been, the silence where his voice should have soothed me. I cried out, not just from the pain in my body, but from the hollow ache in my heart. When Elias was finally placed on my chest, my tears blurred everything. I should have felt nothing but joy, but there was something missing. I wanted to look up and see pride in Colton's face, to share that first moment of life together. Instead, it was just me cradling our son with trembling arms while strangers surrounded me. Minutes later, he finally walked in. He wore a wide smile, as if he had been part of everything, as if his absence didn't matter. He looked at Elias, touched his tiny hand, and said, "That's my boy." His words were proud, but his eyes weren't on me. He didn't notice the tears on my cheeks or the way my body shook. I watched him hold Elias, and instead of feeling closer, I felt an invisible wall between us. He had left me in the moment I needed him most, and no amount of smiles or proud words could erase the truth. I had delivered our son into the world, but I had done it alone, and the weight of that loneliness pressed deeper than any labor pain ever could. The first days back home with Elias were harder than I ever imagined. My body was sore, my stitches pulled with every movement, and my breasts ached from trying to feed him. Nights blurred into days. I would sit in the rocking chair for hours, holding him, begging him to latch, crying when he wouldn't. I was exhausted, but I told myself this was part of being a new mother, that the hard work would be worth it. I needed help, but instead of stepping in, Colton stood back. When Elias cried in the middle of the night, Colton would roll over in bed, cover his head with a pillow, and tell me to handle it. His mother, on the other hand, never missed a chance to point out how poorly I was doing. She'd glance at the way I held Elias and say, "Support his head better." If I tried to rock him to sleep, she'd take him from my arms, muttering, "You don't have the touch." One night, I was trying to nurse Elias, and it wasn't going well. He cried, I cried, and Loretta appeared in the doorway. She crossed her arms and said sharply, "You're just making him more upset. Hand him to me." When I hesitated, she clicked her tongue. "Honestly, you're incompetent at this. Let someone who knows what she's doing take over." Her words cut deep. I was already doubting myself, already drowning in exhaustion, and she poured salt in every wound. I tried to ignore her, tried to keep my focus on Elias, but her presence grew heavier every day. She lingered in the house as if it belonged to her, opening cabinets, rearranging the nursery, acting as though she were the one raising my son. One night, I woke up to silence. Panic rushed through me when I realized Elias wasn't in the bassinet beside me. I stumbled out of bed and followed the faint creak of a rocking chair down the hall. The sight froze me. Loretta sat in my bedroom, rocking my baby in her arms. She leaned close to him, whispering in a soft, eerie voice, "You're mine, not hers. You belong to me." My blood turned cold. I stepped forward, my voice sharp and shaking. "What are you doing in here? Give him back to me." She looked up, calm as ever, and said, "Relax. I was just helping. You were sleeping. You should be grateful." I snatched Elias from her arms, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. When I told Colton what had happened, I expected anger, at least some sign of outrage. But instead, he shrugged. "She's just excited to be a grandma," he said, as if that explained everything. "Don't make it a big deal." But it was a big deal. It was more than that. She had crossed a line, and he didn't care. I stood there, clutching Elias close, and realized how utterly alone I was in my own home. One afternoon, I came home carrying Elias in his car seat, tired from a long morning at the doctor's office. I pushed open the front door, expecting the quiet of our house, but instead I heard footsteps upstairs. My chest tightened. For a moment, I thought maybe Colton had come home early. But when I climbed the stairs, my heart dropped. There was Loretta, standing in the middle of the nursery like it belonged to her. Boxes were scattered across the floor. The curtains I had carefully chosen were folded in a pile, replaced with thick floral drapes that made the room feel dark. The mobile I had hung over Elias's crib was gone, replaced with one she had brought. She was humming softly as she worked, acting as though nothing about this was strange. I froze in the doorway, clutching the handle of Elias's car seat. "What are you doing here?" My voice was sharp, but my throat felt tight. She turned and gave me a smile that made my skin crawl. I thought the room needed a little improvement. "Don't worry, I used my key." My stomach dropped. "Your key? What key?" She held up a small silver key and twirled it between her fingers. "Colton gave it to me. He said I should be able to come and go, in case you need help." I felt dizzy. He had given her a key to my house, our house, without even telling me. My safe place, my private space, wasn't mine anymore. She had walked in whenever she wanted, touching things, changing things, erasing me from my own child's world. I set Elias down carefully and stepped forward, my anger boiling over. "Take your things and get out. Now. This is my home. This is my baby's room. You don't get to walk in here and change it." Her smile slipped, replaced with a frown. "You're being dramatic. I was helping. You should be thanking me." But I didn't back down. My voice shook, but it grew louder. "Leave. Right now. Don't come back unless I say you can." That night, when Colton came home, I told him what happened. I expected him to understand how serious it was, how much she had crossed the line. Instead, his face hardened. "She didn't mean any harm," he snapped. "You're overreacting. My mom just wants to be involved. Why do you always have to make everything a fight?" His words hit me harder than I expected. Instead of standing beside me, he stood against me. He had chosen her again. I held Elias in my arms later that night, rocking him gently while tears burned in my eyes. Something inside me shifted. I couldn't keep living like this, waiting for scraps of respect that never came. That was the moment I started to plan quietly, carefully. If Colton wouldn't protect me, I would have to protect myself, and my son. I didn't know who else to turn to, so I called Harper. The moment she opened the door and saw my face, she pulled me inside without a word. I sat on her couch with Elias in my arms, shaking as I told her everything: Loretta's key, the nursery, Colton's anger. She listened quietly, her hand resting on my arm, her jaw tight with anger for me. "You can't keep living like this," she finally said. "You need help. Real help." The word lawyer made my stomach twist, but Harper didn't back down. She pulled out her phone and gave me the number of someone she trusted. That night, after Elias fell asleep in the crib Harper had set up in her spare room, I sat in the dark and made the call. Meeting the lawyer was like stepping into another world. She was calm, sharp, and asked questions I wasn't ready to face. "Do you have access to your bank accounts? Do you know if there are any accounts you're not listed on?" I shook my head, ashamed that I hadn't thought about those things. She leaned forward. "Then you need to find out. Quietly. Don't let him know you're looking." With shaking hands, I started digging. When Colton left his laptop open one evening, I scrolled through the banking app. My chest tightened as I saw the transfers. Large amounts of money moving into another account. The name on it wasn't his. It was Loretta's. It felt like the floor dropped under me. While I was home with a newborn, struggling to heal, he had been funneling money to his mother, leaving me with almost nothing of my own. My face burned with betrayal, but I forced myself to stay calm. I took screenshots, saved them to a hidden drive, and emailed copies to myself under a name he wouldn't recognize. Once I started, I couldn't stop. I collected texts where Loretta insulted me, her words dripping with disdain. I even began recording her when she didn't know, her voice whispering cruel things about me, mocking me, talking about how Elias was better off with her side of the family. Each piece of evidence felt like a brick in the wall I was building, a shield to protect me when the time came. When I met with the lawyer again, I laid everything on her desk, printed copies, screenshots, recording. She listened carefully, flipping through the papers, and finally said, "You've done the right thing. You need to prepare not just for divorce, but for custody. He and his mother will fight you, but you have proof. That's your strength." Her words scared me, but they also gave me something I hadn't felt in months: control. For the first time, I wasn't just reacting to their cruelty. I was planning. I was protecting Elias and myself in a way they couldn't take from me. I left her office with a folder of documents clutched to my chest, my steps heavy but certain. My life was about to change, and I knew I had to be ready. The family gathered at Loretta's house for dinner, and I almost didn't go. My hands shook as I buckled Elias into his car seat, but a voice inside me told me it was time. I had carried the truth in silence long enough. That night, I walked in prepared. The table was crowded, the air thick with the smell of roast chicken and gravy. Loretta was in her element, passing dishes around, talking louder than everyone else. I kept my eyes on my plate, trying to stay calm. Elias slept in his carrier beside me, his soft breaths giving me strength. It didn't take long. Loretta glanced at me, then at the baby, and her lips curled into a smirk. "Poor thing," she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "He has such a lazy mother. She can't even keep up with him. Thank God I'm around to step in." The room fell silent, waiting for me to shrink like I always did. But I didn't. I lifted my head, my voice steady. "No, Loretta. What he has is a controlling grandmother and a husband who lets her run his life." Colton's fork clattered against his plate. "Maddie, not here," he hissed. "Yes, here," I said firmly, "because everyone deserves to know the truth." I pulled a folder from my bag, my fingers brushing over the papers I had prepared. "You want to talk about me being lazy? Let's talk about your son giving you money behind my back. Let's talk about the account in your name, Loretta," while I was left with nothing. Gasps echoed around the table. Colton's face turned red. "That's enough," he snapped, trying to grab the folder from me. I held it tighter and laid the papers out one by one. "These are bank transfers, thousands of dollars sent straight to her account. And here." I pulled out printed texts, my voice calm though my heart raced. Her words, calling me incompetent, mocking me, telling people I wasn't fit to raise my own child. Loretta's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Colton looked at me like I was a stranger, his hands clenched into fists. Around us, the family shifted uneasily. His sister whispered, "Is this true?" while his uncle muttered something about always knowing Loretta was too involved. Some defended them, saying Loretta meant well, or that Colton was just trying to help his mom. But others looked at me with sympathy, nodding as if they finally saw what I had been living with all along. For the first time, I didn't feel small in that house. I felt steady. I had spoken the truth, and it could not be taken back. Colton glared at me, but his silence was louder than anything he could have said. And Loretta, for once, had no power over me. The truth was out, and nothing would ever be the same again. I packed quietly while Elias napped, my hands trembling as I folded tiny clothes into a bag. Every sound in the house made me flinch, afraid Colton might walk in and catch me. But I couldn't wait any longer. I had made my decision. When the bag was full, I scooped Elias into my arms, pressed his soft cheek against mine, and walked out the door. Harper welcomed me without hesitation. She opened her spare room, set up a crib, and told me I could stay as long as I needed. Her house felt warm and safe, but I still carried a knot of fear in my chest. I kept checking the windows, waiting for Colton's car to pull up. Even though I was free of the house, the weight of him and his mother still pressed against me. It didn't take long for the calls to start. First, Colton's number flashed across my phone. I let it ring, my heart racing. Then came the voicemail. His voice was smooth, practiced, the same one that once charmed me into trusting him. "Maddie, you're overreacting. Bring Elias home where he belongs. We're a family. Don't let this get out of hand." When I didn't answer, his words turned sharper. "You're being cruel, Maddie. Keeping my son from me? You'll regret this. You can't raise him without me." I deleted the messages, but the sound of his voice lingered like smoke in the air. Then Loretta started calling. I recognized her number instantly, and for a moment, I considered blocking her. But a part of me wanted to hear, wanted proof of her cruelty. I pressed play on her first voicemail and felt my stomach twist. "You think you can take my grandson away from me? You're nothing, Maddie. Nothing. That baby is ours, not yours. You've stolen him." Her words cut deep, but they also fueled something inside me. I listened to each new message she left, each one nastier than the last, and instead of shrinking, I felt myself growing harder, stronger. Every insult was proof that I was right to leave. Still, the fear was real. At night, when the house was quiet and Harper was asleep, I sat in the rocking chair with Elias, watching the shadows on the wall. I worried about what would come next. The court dates, the custody battles, the way Colton and Loretta would fight to keep control. My stomach knotted with dread. But then Elias would curl his tiny hand around my finger, and I knew I couldn't go back. Colton tried once more, showing up at Harper's door. His voice was low, almost pleading. "Maddie, think about what you're doing. Don't throw away our marriage. We can fix this. My mom didn't mean to upset you. You're blowing this out of proportion." I held Elias close, standing firm in the doorway. My voice shook, but the words were clear. "You broke my trust, Colton. You left me alone when I needed you. You chose her over me again and again. There's nothing left to fix." He stared at me for a long time, his face shifting between anger and disbelief, before he finally turned and walked away. I closed the door behind him, my heart pounding but steady. For the first time in years, I felt like I had chosen myself. I had chosen Elias. The fear didn't vanish, but it no longer controlled me. I knew the road ahead would be hard, full of lawyers and courtrooms and fights I didn't want. But I also knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was done living in the shadow of their control. I had escaped, and I wasn't going back. The day in court felt like stepping onto a battlefield. My hands were cold as I sat beside my lawyer, clutching the folder of evidence I had spent weeks gathering. Across the room, Colton sat stiffly in his suit, his jaw tight, while Loretta perched behind him, her expression smug, as if she was certain they would win. When the judge entered, the room quieted, and my heart pounded so loudly I could barely hear. My lawyer spoke first, laying everything out piece by piece. Bank records showing the transfers into Loretta's account. Screenshots of her messages where she mocked me. Recordings of her voice calling me incompetent and claiming Elias as her own. Each word echoed in the room like a stone dropping into water. Colton's lawyer tried to argue, saying he was only helping his mother, that the money wasn't meant to harm me. But the judge's face grew colder the longer the excuses dragged on. My lawyer didn't back down. "This wasn't support," she said firmly. "This was betrayal. This was an attempt to strip my client of stability while she carried and raised their child." I kept my eyes on the table, but inside, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time, vindication. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, my legs shaky but my voice steady. I told the court what it was like to give birth alone, to be called lazy and incompetent, to wake up and find Loretta in my room whispering to my son. I didn't cry. I spoke the truth plainly, letting the silence after each sentence say what tears could not. The judge finally delivered the decision. I was granted primary custody of Elias. Colton would have visitation, but under clear rules that put Elias's safety first. Financial support was ordered, enough to make sure my son and I would never be left with nothing again. I glanced across the room. Colton's face was pale with anger, his lips pressed tight. Loretta shook her head in disbelief, whispering furiously to him, but her power was gone. For once, she couldn't twist the story in her favor. As I walked out of the courtroom with Elias in my arms, the weight on my shoulders felt lighter. The fight wasn't easy, but I had won what mattered most: my freedom, my child, and the proof that their cruelty could not break me. Weeks later, in my new apartment, the world felt quiet. The rooms were small but warm, filled with only the things I chose. Elias lay in my arms, his tiny chest rising and falling as he drifted to sleep. I rocked him gently, pressing my lips to his forehead. "You'll never have to wonder if I chose you," I whispered softly. "I always